I think we might just be waiting for Jeff.
For Jeff? Okay.
Yeah. I don't see him in the attendee list. I thought maybe he was, oh, here he is. So what I'll do is I'll promote him to a panelist. I think we might just be waiting. Oh, it's not allowing me to promote him.
Hold on.
Kelly, are you having any more luck?
No, I'm trying it as well.
And is it giving you an error code?
Did.
Okay, we can allow him to talk. I think, at least.
Here he comes.
Can
Okay,
you hear me?
yes.
We can.
I can see you. Can you see me? I can't see myself.
We can see your picture.
If you start your video, we could see you.
I don't have that option.
Really?
Hmm.
Oh, all right. Well, I guess we're gonna have to look at your picture.
Oh, now I can see you.
Right. I was hiding myself while I was trying to solve this problem.
And it keeps saying join as panelist, and I click on it, and then nothing happens.
Really weird.
Is there any way to invite him as a panelist?
Here, wait, hang on.
Oh, we lost him.
Trying to go back in, maybe. Wonders of technology. The good news is, while we're waiting for this to happen, our attendee number is increasing
That's excellent.
a lot, so that's wonderful. Yeah, Jeff, I'm still not able to make you into a panelist. It is giving me an error code.
I just tried promoting him and it didn't give me one.
Oh,
Wonder if he got it.
hmm.
Mhm. Oh, now I got the error code.
Mhm.
304041. Yeah.
Yep, same thing that I'm getting. So I think we might need to settle for Jeff's picture.
All right, so you can hear me though, right?
We can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, no problem. I'll just work off the slides off of this.
Okay.
I'll share your screen, Jeff.
I
Or-
can share them from my end so that, and hopefully you'll be able to see them, Jeff.
Yeah, yeah, and I can bring the slides up on my.
Can you see that?
Yep.
Perfect. All right. I think we're ready to go. Jeff, you want to kick us off?
All right. Are we recording?
Yes.
Okay, great. Welcome everyone, and thanks for sharing the evening with us a little bit. We're going to take the next hour or so and really share some information about our K-8 strategic project and new primary school. So we have Lisa from Harriman with us this evening, as well as Stephen David, and Andrew Bradley, who's a co-chair of our building steering committee. We started meeting regularly again this January, and have been meeting as a primary school building committee for a couple of times each month starting this January. And thought we'd get started just by a little historical perspective. So I was hoping Andrew would take a little time to take a look at this first slide and talk about kind of where we've been.
Sure, happy to. Is there a little bing to advance the projector?
Bing.
Sorry, I was reading the helpful note that Jen Day was giving us on promoting you to a panelist, Jeff.
Okay.
Take it away, Andrew.
Well, I guess we have a nice visual aid for the timeline, but I guess I just want to start with maybe where we are as a group, but also retrospectively where we are as a town. I think one of the things to think about is where our primary schools came from. You know, they're a source of pride for the town. Where do we start? So back in the 50s and 60s, maybe we could skip to the next one. I think the image is probably helpful for what I'm talking to. Back in the 50s and 60s, the primary schools were constructed just as sort of a frame of reference. When Blue Point was finished, LBJ was president. And that served us well for a few years, about 20 years. In the early 1990s, when school populations were growing and demands for increasing and changes in education were happening, under the school board and school community, the town undertook additions to the 3 primary schools. That was back when George H.W. Bush was leaving office and Bill Clinton was coming in, another presidential timeline feeling. But since then, we've been addressing the growing enrollments and demands from education, different modalities of education. Special education is a thing that has really become a strong need and requirement for education in the schools. So things like not just numbers of children, but what's happening with children and how they're being taught has changed. And how we've addressed that since the 90s is by the addition of portables. And you can see through the timeline here, starting in the 2000s, we've been adding them. And up to now, in the K through 8 block of grades, we have 30 portables in the school system being actively used. Starting back in 2014, there was a realization that just adding portables wasn't going to get us where we needed to go. And so the long-range plan was started. 2017 came from another Harriman study to look at various options. How could we solve this dilemma of growing enrollment? And so since 2017, various iterations of the school building committee have gathered and tried to come up with different solutions, including now this latest interaction is actually my second go. And I feel like we're geared up for success moving towards the future. So looking ahead, we're looking around now, trying to come up with the important components and inputs from the community to understand what is important for the new school. Then we can also figure out where and how it should be sited. And then looking forward to lots of interactive community forums this spring where we can all get together and talk about that live.
Thanks, Andrew. And yeah, we're one of the things that we've been really committed to doing just in the last couple of months, both I think as Board of Education and then also our building committee is really around making sure that we're increasing our communication and creating the awareness around this project in terms of why. There's a lot of discussion around the degree of growth that's happening in and around Scarborough and what that can potentially do to the enrollment. But to really underscore kind of the historical perspective that Andrew provided, we're already exceeding the capacity of our existing schools and have been for close to 20 years. So as he mentioned, we're operating 30 portables, most of which are at our K-2 schools, and then also our entire 6th grade next to our middle school. So so that our infrastructure does not support our students' basic educational needs. And we need a sustainable solution to address this that's K to 12, in particular K to 8. So why now? We need a solution to support today's kids and plan for our continued growth in our community. The planning and construction process can take approximately 5 years. So a lot of the discussions that we've been having on how to best systematically address these facility needs is a long process and will take some time. So we need to invest in this planning and start working now towards it. Some of the goals that we've talked about is looking at how we can consolidate 3 primary schools as part of a K to 8 strategic solution, get rid of all of our 30 district portables, alleviate some of the overcrowding at the middle school, and strategically coordinate and align the project with a lot of the other community initiatives that we've been talked about in town as part of a town comprehensive plan. And then we just have a few pictures down here. We also have a downloadable PDF that has some of this information as well for folks that are tuning in. And as we mentioned, this presentation is also being recorded and will also be publicly available following this evening.
Excellent. So thank you, Andrew, and thank you, Jeff. As Jeff mentioned, my name is Lisa Salwin. I'm an architect with Harriman and part of the team that is providing information and going through this process with the school district community and building committee. Tonight, as Jeff mentioned, a lot of information on sort of the background of the project, the why now, and goals, and a lot of the work that has been done to date. The second part of tonight's presentation will be on educational visioning by David Stephen, and it's really exciting, the process that we go through for this, and then also ways to which you can get involved. And so, as Jeff said, a big focus on making sure that the community is informed, as well as many opportunities to be engaged in the process. We'll go over those as well. The next couple of slides that I'm going to go through, as Jeff mentioned, all of this first half is on a downloadable PDF. We'll have it uploaded to the comment section here in a minute for folks to download, as well as links at the end of the presentation for you to be able to access information from tonight, but going forward as well. What I'm going to go over here are program inadequacies of the K-2 schools. And this is information that was collected through the various studies, as well as has been updated to current day and is continuing to be updated as we continue to have in-depth conversations with all the principals from the primary schools through the middle school and work with them to understand how the space is being utilized and where the deficiencies are. So just a few of those, in particular, the combined cafeteria and gymnasium. So all of the K-2 schools have one space that serves as both their gymnasium and their cafeteria. This space is too small for the intensity of use and those two functions. A lot of the scheduling is driven by the lunch period, the amount of setup it takes to turn it into a cafeteria, then break it down, clean it, and turn it back into a gymnasium takes up precious programming time. They do not have a stage. The combined space, as just indicated, has scheduling difficulties and 25% reduction in specialist time. And when we say specialist, it's art, music, and gym. And the number of lunches needed to get the students through and have lunch requires late and early lunches, which really impacts the students' ability to learn. So in this image you see on the left, it's set up for the cafeteria and eating, and on the right, it's set up for gym, so the tables are moved aside and pads are put in place so that students don't run into them. We mentioned the portables. So as the schools continued to grow, portables were added as a temporary solution. There are 18 portables at the K-2 schools, 30 in total in the district, and all 30 are in grades K through 8. The 18 of the 30 portables at the primary school, some of those portables are connected to other portables, as you see in the image. And more than half of those temporary classrooms are over 20 years old. And the movement of kids back and forth between portables outside does pose a security concern, as they have to access the core spaces within the school and go outside to get into the main building to do that. Insufficient meeting space. There's many reasons that staff and students need to meet throughout the day outside of a classroom space, whether that be for IEPs, which are individual educational plans, meeting with specialists. And the lack of meeting space poses issues for staff and specialists and families who come to those meetings to discuss the development of their child, and also have privacy and legal implications due to confidentiality or lack thereof based on shared spaces and lack of space for that use. So the art and music rooms, if they do exist, they are small and usually shared. So the art and music space typically in schools are larger than classrooms and specific to that program. Here you can see a space that is used is the size of a typical classroom being used for both art and music. So we have paint and drawing happening right next to the piano and xylophones, and lack of storage and lack of correct materials for the space. And in some instances, the programming does not, or the space does not allow to have a space for art. And sometimes it ends up on a cart and has to travel from room to room. Inadequate space for special education. The staff does a great job providing special education programming. However, the building does not support their efforts. A lot of specialists share a space with essentially office dividers between their different program areas, which doesn't allow them to administer their program as they need to. And also the spaces are quite small and lacking proper storage to be able to do that. So impacts of doing nothing. The impacts of doing nothing is continued overcrowding. The primary school lots are out of room to add more portables while providing site circulation, parking, and play areas. Several times, hardscape play areas will get taken over by parking because there's a lack of parking or adequate site circulation. The existing K2 schools without portables are collectively undersized by approximately 40 to 60,000 square feet. Safety and security issues. So a lot of these schools were built before some of the current thinking around safety and security in schools. And 2 of the 3 primary schools do not have secure front entry vestibules. There is a lack of storage in general in the building, which ends up in the hallways, whether it be supplies for programs or equipment or student storage, which impacts egress from the building. Students must travel out of the building to access program areas at 8 Corners specifically, and site circulation and drop off are problematic. More and more there are parents driving their kids to school and therefore not enough room for queuing of cars or separation of bus and cars. To build on the safety and security, just to highlight some images of the lack of storage in the schools and how that does impede the egress pathway. And then inadequate or missing program spaces. So in these images, you can see that a lot of the art storage or art supplies are stored in the corridor, as well as maker space and STEM supplies stored in a closet because that program has to be on a cart. Another impact of not doing anything is continued energy inefficiency. The inadequate insulation values are 1/10 to 1/3 of the current standard for energy code compliance. And this negatively impacts the energy use and operational cost of the buildings. Higher operation costs due to age of the building and their small size. So when you look at the K2 schools, they cost approximately 50% more per square foot to operate than Wentworth Intermediate School. And keep in mind that Wentworth Intermediate School is fully air conditioned and the K2 schools are not. So it actually has a bigger draw on energy. Fiscally irresponsible, it costs more per square foot to run the non-air conditioned primary schools than the air conditioned middle school. And with the 3 K2 schools in separate buildings, Certain specialists have to travel from school to school in order to deliver equitable programming. And that actually cuts down on the time they can provide the program and cost time for travel. And it costs more to modernize and operate the K-2 schools than to build a new energy efficient consolidated school. So that's a background on sort of where we're at with the project, what has been done to date. And so as we are starting this process, we wanted to give an overview of what the roadmap to a successful project looks like and the different parts it takes to get to a successful project. So a lot of the work that is highlighted or colored in the screen is really all the work that it's going to take to get to a referendum. And there's several layers here. The top above the yellow line is what we like to call the community engagement. And there's many, many stakeholders, many layers of community. The light blue or the greenish bubbles really represent the internal school community. So that's the teachers, the faculty, the students, the staff. The dark purple is what we call the external community, as the community, all of you that we're meeting with tonight. And really the different touch points to make sure that everyone is providing, we're soliciting great input from everybody. We're listening to the needs, and we're meeting with folks and being able to present back what we've heard and how that has informed the process. The overall yellow line talks about the 3 major phases leading up to referendum, and that's the planning of the projects, making sure we have the goals set, the objectives, what is it we're trying to answer and solve, the programming that essentially provides a concept that provide the solution to that question. And parallel to that is site selection. So we'll be doing planning and program and site selection all in parallel because they all inform one another. And so that process will go on for quite a while. And then below that line is the touch points with the building committee, which really, which we check in with a regular basis. And that's all leading up to referendum. So you can see it's really heavily weighted in the community, both internal and external participation and engagement. We really need everybody involved to make this a success. So we're really at the beginning of that process, and later in the presentation, you'll see different ways to which you can get involved. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to David Stephen to go over the educational visioning. And I'm going to stop sharing because he has a separate PowerPoint.
Okay.
So you should be able to go.
Yep. All right. Can everybody see that okay?
We can.
All right. Well, thanks, Lisa. So here, have I unmuted now? Good evening, everybody. My name is David Stephen, and I'm with an architect and an educator with New Vista Design in Boston. I'm the educational programmer as part of the Harriman team. And so I've spent a lot of years living and working in schools as a teacher and an assistant principal and a curriculum developer. So the role that I often play in these projects is to help sort of bridge that divide between creating a forward-thinking educational vision and what that means in terms of architectural possibilities. And that's what this whole process is about. So I'm going to talk to you about what educational visioning is, what that process entails. I'm also going to share some of the educational architectural priorities that so far in the conversation have come up in the initial conversations with leadership, but this is just the very beginning of the conversation. And then most of the time tonight, of the 20 minutes that I'm going to spend with you, I want to be eliciting your feedback using an interactive platform called Mentimeter. So I'm going to have some prompts, and I'll tell you later how you can give us your feedback. So the visioning process is pretty strategic, but it's also an iterative process. And we're going to be taking notes the whole time and making those transparent and available. It's really about crafting an educational vision that is really connected to the goals of the district, and making sure then that we discuss all the design approaches and the sort of big picture priorities for the building that will ensure that you're going to get your best building possible for your primary school. And so we have 2 workshops lined up so far, one on May 26th to discuss educational vision, the second on June 7th to discuss design patterns. We're meeting with the faculty next week on the 18th to do some initial sharing of information and asking for feedback. And we have a third workshop that we haven't set a date for, that's probably going to happen in the fall. And I know that Jeff is going to be talking to you at the end of this presentation about how you can get involved in this process if you're interested. We have had to do this virtually in the past few years, but we've actually figured out a way to do it, to make it highly interactive, to make sure that people get into smaller breakout group discussions so everybody can have their voice heard. We can collect a lot of information using the Mentimeter platform I'll share with you tonight. We keep everything in a Google Docs folder, and we keep track of all the notes. So it's really about crafting a narrative that contains your educational vision as connected to your master plan for your district, and then the design priorities and goals that are going to feed into how we think about adjacencies and connections between spaces in the building, and really optimizing the space template. This connects to your educational plan as well. And we want to build upon all the work that has been done within the district, and use the language that is resonant for folks. So we're looking at things like your school improvement plan and all the different sources that we'll be discussing with your district, to make sure that we're hitting all the right notes. I will say that some of the overarching themes, before we get into asking some of your thoughts, that we think about when we design schools these days, is that we want to use every square inch of the building. Now that everything is wired, we don't want to just think about teaching and learning happening in the classrooms. We want to use all the between spaces. We want to make sure that all spaces are flexible and multi-use, especially classrooms, which of course are still our basic building block. We want to build synergy and connectivity between spaces. We want to have large spaces and small spaces and formal and informal spaces. And oftentimes we want to define learning clusters and communities, which enable students and teachers to develop a sense of small learning community. And this is particularly important for larger, when we have larger populations, but we want to create an experience of being in a small school environment, and we can definitely do that. We want to provide venues for hands-on learning and project-based learning, and we want to support the community using and accessing the building in safe ways after hours. So those are some of the big picture themes. Also, I'm going to ask you in a few minutes what your priorities are. So I just want to say that some of the low-hanging fruit that we're going to be thinking about in any case is, of course, that the buildings are ADA compliant and they take a universal design approach, that they have safe entry and security features. As Lisa mentioned, this is particularly important at this time. Thermal comfort, heating and cooling. We're looking at buildings being used year round. We need to make sure that they're comfortable. This will come along with modern technology and furniture, and really thinking about a robust technology infrastructure that will allow the school to evolve and grow over time. And all classrooms should be well-sized and have natural light. We know from research that that's just really important in terms of student attention and performance and health and teachers. So this is an opportunity during this process. It's like the 10,000-foot view. We're thinking about whatever your final solution is. These are the big picture priorities that we want to be making sure to be thinking about. And in the visioning process, we really encourage people to be aspirational in their thinking. We'll definitely need to make compromises along the way, but this is the time to think big and to think about what's really going to give you a building that will last you for decades to come. So I want to share a little bit about future-ready teaching and learning as we've initially discussed with your district, and then see what's most important to you. When we talk about future-ready teaching and learning, we definitely think that the 6 R's of reading, writing, and arithmetic, and rigor, relevance, and relationship are very important, but we're also thinking about critical thinking, communication, collaboration, creativity, and citizenship. And these are called the 5 C's. And there are really lots of educators are talking about them all around this country and internationally. It implies that you want to teach students how to be learners. And so you want them to use their head and their hands. This also implies that they're learning social emotional skills. So we're looking at Educational delivery becoming more student-centric, active, flexible, definitely technology where you need it, when you need it. We want learning to be collaborative, and sometimes it's individual too, and we want it to be both traditional and project-based. This connects to ideas about workforce development. It's not just like these are nice ideas. This is what workers are looking, this is what employers are looking for, and this is what also connects to post-secondary success. So when we asked your leadership about what was most important to them, they identified these top 10, and I'm going to go through them very quickly and then have you rate them in terms of what's most important to you. So first of all, differentiating instruction, meeting kids where they're at. This implies that there's co-teaching going on in the classroom. Oftentimes there are a number of adults. We're targeting intervention, gearing delivery towards students, particularly learning styles, and if they have special education needs, we want to address them. Community connections, and I'm actually sharing this with you in the order of sort of priority that were expressed by your leadership. Community connections being very important. Learning should be authentic. Thinking about performance-based assessment, students creating products and doing things that feel real and meaningful to them. The idea of student-centered learning. The word agency is about students having a sense of feeling control over their own learning, and this connects to them developing confidence in their ability to communicate, to organize, to solve problems. Social emotional learning is something that educators talk a lot about. This has to do with building character. It could have to do with building self-awareness and responsible decision-making, developing relationships in the school that feel supportive, feeling known well within the school. Health and wellness connects to movement and varied context for learning, fitness, physical education, outdoor connections, and mental health is part of this as well. Universal design for learning really is connected to that idea of differentiated approaches. So we're making sure that we want to have varied delivery methods in the classroom to give students different ways of interacting with, representing, and expressing and engaging with what they're learning. And that implies that we need to have good storage. And we've talked a bunch about storage already and the lack of storage in your primary schools now. So that's something that across the board, teachers are really eager to have more of to be able to support this universal design. Parental and community engagement, that having parents connected to the school community, looking to and leveraging the adult world connections, which also connects to that idea of making learning meaningful for students. Workshop model. Now this is something about a different way that people are teaching now, but it's very, very common, and this is important to your district, is the teacher doesn't just stand up and teach. They might give a lesson for 10 or 15 minutes, a mini lesson, and then students interact with the information. So they might be working independently or in small groups, and then they share what they've learned and what they're discovering. So that implies that classrooms have to be able to be set up in very different ways for traditional instruction with kids facing forward, teacher up at the front, but also in small groups or for individual learning. And finally, the 5 C's, which I mentioned before, and which your district also feels are very important. These are higher order thinking skills that give students sort of the skills to be lifelong learners. So what I want to ask now, I know that's a lot of information, and but we did want to get just sort of like your quick feedback on this about what's important to you, and then we're going to get a little bit more specific about some feedback we're looking for. So I'm going to ask you to go now to menti.com and enter the number code that is there. And when you get there, you can press the heart that's on the screen, and that will let us know that you've arrived safely at the site. And you should see this slide. If you want to do this on your telephone, you can use the QR code on the right, and that will also bring you to menti.com. The slides that I'm going to share coming up all will have this code up at the top. So if you lose it, just go back to menti.com and you'll be able to pick it up again. I'll leave the slide up for just another few seconds before we switch over, but it looks like we've got a lot of people there. And I'll just say that while we've been doing these virtual workshops, this has been a great tool to be able to collect a lot of information. So you're going to see, this is all anonymous, the information we're collecting. We don't know who it's coming from, but you're going to see a lot of these thought bubbles coming up on screen as we ask you questions. And then we're going to go through all of that and see what are the themes that rise to the top as we put together a set of consolidated notes for each of these meetings and workshops that we'll be going into. All right. So now I'm going to just ask you to look at this slide here and give us your best shot at what's most important to you in terms of those 10 educational focus areas that we just reviewed to you that were prioritized by your district. I have a slide after this for asking you about what's missing. So there very well are things that are not on this list that are important to you. So we'll get to that in just one sec. But if you could just take a minute to prioritize these and then press submit. Always interesting to see how these things shake out. Of course, all of these things, again, have been identified as being important to your district. And these are things that districts around the country are thinking about. But right up at the top, we can see that student-centered and social emotional learning are very important. And particularly, you know, when we think about primary schools, and primary school students, it's so important that students develop a healthy relationship with learning and that they feel excited about being there and that it's a place of discovery for them and building confidence. And that's what student-centered learning is all about, as is social emotional learning, feeling known well, feeling part of a community and feeling like you have a sense of connection and identity within the school. Health and wellness right up at the top there, universal design and real world connections. I'm going to leave this up for one more, about 15 more seconds if anybody wants to. All right, and now I'm going to switch to another slide, which will allow you to add just any ideas about other educational focus areas that you would like the district to be thinking about as we, think about a facility that's going to support these educational approaches. So these will come up as thought bubbles. And as I said, we don't know where they're coming from, but we'll see what kind of themes emerge. And you have the ability to submit multiple times. So far, all these things we're definitely going to be talking about all these things. Flexible space that supports inclusive learning, active learning, space for the arts and sciences, connections to the outdoor and to green spaces, foreign language skills, great, experiential education, safety, and a combined school that will pass on the first referendum. We know it's important to get it passed. Gifted program opportunities, engaging mixed level shared space. And we're definitely looking at, maximizing the use of those big ticket spaces like a cafetorium and a gym. As Lisa was talking about, all of your primary schools have a shared cafeteria and gym, which is very difficult in terms of scheduling. Most often we look at cafetoriums that are great multi-purpose spaces with stages and really serve the community. Outdoor learning, more sustainable learning, fewer papers. Yeah, and we're definitely going to be looking at sustainable building measures, very much so. And the idea of making the building itself a kind of a tool for learning. Opportunity for intergenerational engagement. Okay, STEM. Lots of schools are thinking about STEM and which is science, technology, engineering, and math. Oftentimes adding the A for the arts, which is just really about good integrated kind of project-based approaches to learning about science, technology, and engineering. Natural science, safe allergy dining spaces, okay. More sustainable placement, natural light. Okay, great. I'm going to keep us moving because we have limited time and I've got some more. And this is not going to be the only opportunity to give feedback here. So, and I've got some more specific questions for you now about your educational, architectural, and community priorities. So we've already talked a lot about educational priorities, but we'll go a little bit deeper here. And I'll just say, when we talked to your leadership, initially, these were the things that came up as very important to them. So 21st century learning and learning spaces, a whole child approach, which means all the enrichment around athletics, around music, around theater, art, student engagement and inspiration, a program that's really going to get kids excited, an inclusive school culture, opportunities for teachers to collaborate so that they don't feel isolated, outdoor learning opportunities, differentiating instruction, creating small school community. And I know as we're thinking about combining these three primary schools, that's on a lot of people's mind is how do we make these really feel like small school communities where kids feel known well, and parents do too. Supporting growth and alleviating overcrowding. So these were the things that came up as educational priorities. This might be a little bit redundant because we talked about it, but here's another chance to go deeply into your more educational priorities. After this, we're going to talk about specifically architectural priorities, what you would love to see in a new facility. Okay. So meeting every student where they're at, which connects to the idea of inclusive classrooms and equal opportunities, opportunities for theater, art, multicultural learning, social emotional learning, not letting students feel isolated, okay. Whole child focus, SEL, great. And let's see, inclusion for all learning styles. Okay, I'm going to jump quickly to the next one because we did cover a lot of that in the last slide. And this one focuses more on your initial thoughts about architectural priorities, like what you would love to see in terms of a new building. So here's what your district said was most important to them initially. The idea of universal design and access, which is handicapped accessibility, but also making it really easy to move through the building, understand how to use it. Space that meets your current needs, that's going to evolve and be flexible over time, that's going to be welcoming and inspiring. The idea of creating a library learning commons, that's the heart of the school. Space that's supporting young learners, so child-scaled spaces, art, music, and performance center that might be used by the community as well. Play areas, athletic spaces, again, small learning communities, and safe parking and drop off. So those were some of the highlights. And now let's hear or see what people are thinking about your top architectural priorities. All right, a swimming pool. There's always got to be one. I know that's something that that a lot of people are interested in. outdoor appropriate play for winter. Yes, we're thinking about how to bring learning outside, and we've learned a lot about that in the last few years, how important that is. A building that's going to evolve over time, bathrooms that are equipped for small people and sized correctly, net zero sustainable approach to construction, LEED certified, a separate school from the high school kids, building that can grow within the community beyond ADA compliant, and that's where we get into the universal design pieces. Space for scalability of infrastructure with future growth, and that's really important. Strong spaces for those enrichment areas like music, art, PE, cafeteria, learning commons, good play space, renewable energy, appropriate indoor space for physical education activities. And we're thinking in elementary school about kids being able to move too throughout the day, throughout the building as well, and bright, inviting learning environments, thoughtful community integration. Particularly around the library, how might that connect? A feeling being small, even though large and combined. Don't place it where it will disrupt another school's architectural priorities. Separate gym and cafeteria. Another one for a proposal that will pass at a referendum vote. Consideration of green space. Space to chill and get calm, before and after care, specific spaces. So these are all things we definitely are thinking about as we approach the design of these primary schools. Color integration and tones for learning, meeting space for friends to meet up within the building. All right. And I have one more prompt, and that is about community priorities in terms of, what's most important to you as a community. So here's what your district said: community use and access, community meeting spaces, indoor and outdoor spaces that are weather appropriate with changing seasons, access by youth groups. We want to make sure that the building can be safely accessed, oftentimes by community after hours or on weekends, and oftentimes we have separate entries or areas of the school that can be blocked off from the rest of the school. Community support, making sure it's community backed, and childcare came up as a priority. So with that, I'm going to open up to hear about your community priorities. Okay, so we see childcare again. Okay, so volunteer opportunities, spaces for the arts, a rec center, including year-round space for sports and convening. And yes, we're hearing pool again. Nice playground that can be used when school is not in session. Opportunities for retired members from the community to benefit from access. And again, we're thinking about schools these days as really being community resources, and making sure that they can be safely accessed at certain areas of the building, at least after hours. Appropriate traffic flow, spaces for after-school programs, a balance sitting with existing school and community uses, and parents' ability to use space for after-school friend groups and play dates hosted by a parent. Accessibility, intergenerational friendly spaces, nice walking paths. All right. Well, again, there are going to be more opportunities to share your ideas, and we're going to be taking all of the notes that we took from today and putting them in a consolidated set with highlighting the themes that are coming up. And we're going to add that to the work that we do in the visioning process. And that process is one in which we're going to be looking at creating a group with leadership, teachers, parents, students, community partners, and members of the general community. And I know that Jeff is going to talk to you about that if you're interested in getting involved. As we said, it's a kind of a strategic approach to looking at all of these different ideas about your educational practices as connected to architectural possibilities and priorities. And we'll be defining guiding principles. We'll be looking at design approaches, sharing lots of best practice examples of schools that have been designed and built in the last 5 years, and you can see what's most resonating with you. We'll be sharing sort of aspirational ideas, and we'll be talking about adjacencies. And finally, we'll be talking about how to share this with the community so we make sure that we're really clear about the messaging and the priorities that are being established. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing.
Thank you, David. I'm going to pull up the screen here for the PowerPoint on next steps and ways to get involved. So a lot of great information that will be shared and distributed and posted on the website. And then we have a couple slides here, some about upcoming workshops and forums, and then Jeff will go over ways to which you all can get involved.
And Lisa,
yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm just going to jump in here. I have a hard stop right now, so I'm going to say thank you very much for listening. I'm sorry I can't stay around for the Q&A, but Lisa and her team are going to be sharing with me all the questions that have come up. And I look forward to meeting many of you in this process as we continue forward.
Excellent. Thank you so much, David. A lot of great and exciting things happening in the visioning, and definitely those that want to get involved, do reach out. Upcoming workshops. So there are a series of workshops that will be coming up, as well as additional community forums. There is a workshop with the staff, informational workshop and visioning session with all of the teachers and school staff on May 18th. And then, as David said, there's a series of workshops that we will be running for the educational visioning workshops. There's 3 in total, and these are times to which community members can get involved. The first one will be educational priorities. That's happening on May 26th, 6 to 8 p.m. Another programming storefront meeting in between those workshops will be occurring, and I'll circle back to that and keep going on the visioning workshops here. The second visioning workshop will be on design patterns and guiding principles. That'll be June 7th, 6 to 8. And then last but not least will be the key spaces and adjacencies. And this is really after we have all the priorities and design patterns and principles defined, we start looking at those key spaces and how they relate to one another and the adjacencies that make sense. That will come in the fall, making sure that we hit all the stuff we need for planning before summer, be able to spend some time moving things forward over the summer and reconvene in the fall on those workshops, knowing that many folks travel during the summer. The programming storefronts are where we will be meeting with staff in the schools. We spend the day in each of the schools just being available to staff and teachers to be able to ask and answer any questions that they have. We've already engaged all of them in a survey to get their feedback, as well as met and toured the schools with all the principals. So upcoming community forums, tonight was on the history and the why now, and the goals, as well as educational visioning. The next community forum will be on June 6th, 6 to 8 p.m. And this is where we will go over the site selection process and the criteria that is being used to evaluate sites. We won't necessarily be talking about sites, but more about the process and getting criteria from the community that is important to the community in that process, to make sure that we have that from all of you as we continue through that process. And then the third forum will be crafting the design statement, where we work with all of you to understand the essence of the K-2 schools and craft the design statement for the future program. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Jeff for ways to which everyone can get involved.
Thanks, Lisa. The first way is to join a committee. So we're looking at, and as Lisa just mentioned, there are upcoming workshops for educational visioning as well as the community forum. So obviously taking part in that. But there are also, and I know the email with a link to this Google Doc form to sign up for a building subcommittee. So as I mentioned before, we've been meeting twice a month, our building committee on this project since January, but we're also going to be starting up subcommittees we just really need more folks to get involved along the lines of the communication, sustainability and building systems, site design, and then also educational specifications, which is linked to a lot of the things that we've been talking about tonight. So again, please join a committee. So there'll be links and further communication coming out probably starting tomorrow to get involved and also just share your information, and then there'll be upcoming links to meetings and times and everything like that. So we're definitely looking for folks to join a committee or attend a forum as we go forward this spring.
Excellent. And I think that then pulls up the ways to which to access the information. So there is a QR code that will take you a quick link to the district website as to where all the information is. And we will be posting here shortly, I think in the chat, the 2-page document with all of the information and the why now, and goals, as well as programming inadequacies and other information. So be on the lookout for that. And with that, I think we are going into the Q&A session for this evening. So I will stop sharing and we will open up the chat for Q&A. And another option is to submit questions, and we can answer those through the website as well. So I'll pass it back to Jeff and Andrew for that.
Yeah, I mean, I will just, while people are thinking about their questions, just give everyone the plug to please join us and help out. Helping and sitting on a committee of any type really gets a great sense of ownership in this process. And as always, many hands makes light work. So the more of us there are, the less there is to do. So please raise your hand virtually or physically if you want to be part of this process.
So Andrew, I see that I think Samantha had put a question out to you guys. I don't know if you see it in the chat.
Yeah. Question here is about timing of these meetings and whether we can shift away from evening hours, away from bedtime. I think that's a great idea. I think particularly in the June meeting, we can try and look and see if we can accommodate a different time slot to make it more available. The next question is about possible locations that are being considered. I think we'll really talk about that as a larger discussion point. That's really the full reason for our next meeting on the 6th. But I think obviously in town is as close to the middle of everybody's path as possible would be the desire. So we'll see what comes of it, but that really is going to be significantly impacted by what everybody wants to see from the site. Next question is about votes. Well, let's see here. A little early, but for history, it took 2 votes over 5 years to get Wentworth approved. Just wondering how we think ahead to that difficulty in the past as we all want to move this forward. I think one of the ways, I'm going to beat the drum on membership in the communities, in the committees. One of the ways to help get the word out and get a referendum passed is to have an enormous amount of community involvement. So this outreach is one way that we're hoping to get more and more people's ears and eyes involved in the process, and so we can get a better outcome when we get to the referendum point. The more we know about what people want and what they want to see and hear at the referendum time, and the more they know about it, before we get to referendum, the better chance we have of having this successful first time around. Lisa, maybe you could speak a little bit to the timeline there if you wanted to. There's a question about timeline for the project.
Absolutely. So pretty much from the start, which we are considering it at the start right now, it's projected that it'll be approximately 5 years until a project like this would be planned, constructed, and ready to be occupied.
So the next question here is about what happens to the land on which the facilities sit now in the consolidation. I think what this is referring to is the existing school buildings and what will happen if there's a new building. That's an excellent question. And I think that's a giant question for the community. How do we want to reuse those spaces? There are a lot of opportunities out there. As the committee's talked about, different things have come up, pre-K, senior centers, community centers. There's all sorts of opportunities once we don't have to worry about educational requirements in the primary school. We can flex into all sorts of different uses. So that's going to be part of the bigger question. And I don't think anyone here could answer appropriately what that would be, but I think the opportunities are almost limitless. Next question is about grade redistribution. And if we're distributing the grades between the new buildings to reduce overcrowding. And the answer there is yes. I mean, we're really looking at this as a strategic project from that K to 8 range. There are problems in the different grade levels that we're hoping that by shifting some of the phasing that can be addressed. No one has answered how that is going to be done, but it's definitely part of an overall strategy to look to use changing what grades sit in which buildings so we can address population. There's a tag-on question here that I don't quite know the beginning. Samantha, maybe you could redefine, does that happen at the same time? Maybe you could help me out with a little prompt.
It's in reference to determining what happens to the existing sites. Is that correct, Samantha?
Plenty around the curve. Yeah, okay. You know, it's a little bit of a difficult question to answer in terms of will we plan it at the same time. I think we can come up with potential reuses for the projects or potential projects or reuses for those buildings. One of the things that happens, and this is one of those little things in legalities, is if the school doesn't use it for a school, it becomes an asset of the town. And so it becomes more than just a discussion within the school board. It then becomes a grander discussion with the council and the greater community at large. So yes, I think the school board would definitely want to be involved in what those future uses are and to help accommodate those things. But I think it needs larger groups of people from other corners of the community to help answer when that decision will be made and what path it will take, whether it's parallel to the school or whether it's second or offset. I think I'm falling behind. Will there be a decision on grades before the new school is on the referendum? Lisa, I think you should probably answer that.
Yeah, no, so yes, we need to know what grades we're planning for in the school in order to design the spaces accordingly. So that will be part of the information that is provided during or before the referendum, really, and we part of the conversation as we continue to develop the project. And then I see that Kelly, I believe, has now shared the link to the 2-page document. There's a link in the chat for everyone if you want to download the 2-page document that provides a lot of the information from tonight's session. And this will also, the whole session will be uploaded to the web as well.
How many students would be in each class? That's going to be a variable answer. Lisa, I think being a programmer, you are the person who should best answer that.
So we'll be working, the answer at this moment, we don't know. We're going to be working with Jeff and his team, the superintendent and the school district to pretty much create a design number for the classrooms. I know that Scarborough has ranges for each of the grade levels, and they're always looking to be at the lower end of that range for those grade levels.
Do we anticipate a lot of resistance? Resistance for consolidation versus the legacy schools being separate. I am a nostalgic person, and so I understand the desire to have the school around the corner. I think, though I am an engineer by training, and that has a lot to do with fiscal responsibility, I think when you look at the overall picture, sometimes you have to let nostalgia be nostalgia. So I think there may be resistance, but I think once we let people know what the benefits are to consolidation, not just fiscally, but also how much better a new facility would be over trying to accommodate changes in the older facilities. I think no one will go kicking and screaming. I think everyone will understand that it's the best path forward.
I think too, maybe Jeff can speak a little bit about the educational benefits of consolidating the grade levels all into a building.
A lot of it, I think also Steve and David touched on a little bit as part of the envisioning, but the collaboration that can happen when, you know, all of your teachers in a given grade level are under the same roof, you know, and same with students in grade levels and being able to team and collaborate. There's a lot of educational benefits to having, you know, when we also talked about the site selection being close to the rest of the central campus, but having those connections and being able to coordinate the educational experience and then also connect with, you know, just as professionals. There's a lot of operational efficiencies, you know, which certainly Todd and others could touch on more specifically, but then also the educational benefits of being in close proximity to one another is certainly significant. And there are lots of ways too to have smaller communities. The smaller community feel in a larger school, as we know, and how Wentworth is designed and operated with the learning communities within Wentworth. So I think there's a lot of knowledge base and expertise also, and willingness to explore those options in a larger school for our K-2 learners.
Thank you, Jeff. The next question is about greater community support in getting communications outside of this school-centric community. And that would be another plug for someone to help us by joining a communications subcommittee. We do want to get larger outreach. And so having people in the communication group who can help reach that net of information out to people outside those parents and teachers and people who have family members in the schools, that would be wonderful. So please join. Next question was from Samantha. Given the comments about potential challenges in community support, why does this get planned outside of a larger community growth plan? Meaning, why is it not inclusive of the town council plans at large? So I think this is maybe a lessons learned moment, this particular point. I think what we've understood is that we do need larger town council and town engagement, and I think we have that now. We have got a couple members of the town council sitting in the building committee. We also have the town manager here, and he sits in on various meetings to help lend his opinions and thoughts on the process. So yes, I think there has been some challenges with community support, but I think we've addressed them, and we're trying to increase that engagement with other members of our community, not just the council and town hall, but we want larger engagement from people who have input. And back to please volunteer for a communications subcommittee. Well, I think I've successfully tired everybody out of hearing my voice. So I think we could probably draw this to a close as far as Q&A. I would say that there's opportunity to submit questions still. So if you think of something later tonight in an aha moment, please send them in. and we will include them in the information that we present and use going forward.
Yes, absolutely. And we will post all of that on the website as well. So we will also have a frequently asked question. There's several questions that come up by many community members. And so we will have those posted soon on the website. And as Andrew said, please join us and come out and volunteer for any of the, whether it be educational visioning, communication, sustainability, wherever your passion may lie and you want to help out, please join. And I'll pass it over to Jeff to wrap us up here.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank everybody for their attention, for their participation, for their thoughtful ideas. I know there's certainly some of you who are part of our 6 to 7 o'clock interactive community dialogue, and a lot of this is all intertwined, right? And everybody's here and focused on. I just heard so many wonderful ideas and the perspectives that were shared. Just the common thread through all of it is that we're all trying to do what's best for our students and our kids, and that comes first. And it's just been really a great night, and I'm looking forward to really just continuing to expand and build on awareness and participation, and getting involved. So as we've already outlined, look for a lot more communication coming right out of the gate. And thanks so much to everyone, and Andrew and Lisa for all of your time and efforts, and Diane and Emily and everyone else behind the scenes kind of putting all of this together. There's a lot of work that went into this presentation and both nights. So I just appreciate everyone's time and professionalism and attention to detail and all that kind of stuff. And thank you all for a great night.
All right.
Thanks, Jeff. Have a good night.
Thank you all.